I shot him to stop him.
This is your house, ma'am?
Yeah.
You're aware that your husband is deceased?
Wow. I live on this totally quiet street, and it's like, hey, neighbors.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to review the Lifetime movie Doomsday Mom, dealing with Lori Vallow. It aired in America this past Saturday on Lifetime, and so I'm going to quickly take you through what I thought were the good, bad and ugly sections of the movie. Even though it's quite long, almost 90 minutes, I'm going to be keeping this review quite short. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So we start with the good, and I definitely learned a few things in the movie. One of the things that stood out was the email to Chad from Lori impersonating Charles. I'm not going to provide a copy of that email here, but I certainly found that interesting. Also found the dynamics, the family dynamics that were represented, that were dramatized, especially between Lori and Tylee. I thought that was done very well. I thought the Tylee actress, I thought that whole dynamic really brought to life some of the tension and how the tension kind of grew, especially Tylee's response to what is starting to go on, not only with her mother, but people who were starting to disappear. And I also thought the relationship between Lori and Chad was depicted quite well. The thing that I think they emphasized well as well was the sort of fairy tale that Lori found herself in, where she was sort of, you often got a sense that she was waking up from a delusion, or that she was caught up in a delusion, and you sort of got the sense that you certainly looking at her, you couldn't tell what she was really thinking. It was difficult to sort of figure out what was going on in her heart and mind. You could see where it was going, but it was hard to sort of figure out, what on earth are you thinking about? Because her beliefs were so extreme, right? And one of the sort of good representations of that was something that really happened, was where she went barbecuing after Charles's passed. And it was quite a violent passing, but you sort of see them barbecuing, and Lori looks very happy. And it's almost like she's happy because the things that Chad had predicted were now coming to pass. And so, it's not only happy that kind of someone who she sees as an obstacle in her life is now gone, but it basically means Chad does have this sort of divine, he is the sort of divine messenger. And of course, with each person who passes, Lori's coming closer to her own glory. And you can see that she gets really caught up in that. And I think that was done quite well. What I don't think was done very well, and this brings us to the bad, but it's sort of understandable, were the actual crimes. So Tylee's death, JJ's death, Charles's death, you don't really see any dramatization there. So with Tylee, for example, you see her at one point at Yellowstone, and then on camera, sort of in the scene where she's standing at Yellowstone, she sort of disappears. She sort of just fizzles into nothing. And in other words, they are not trying to explain what happened to her, right? With JJ, you have something even stranger. You sort of just, JJ is suddenly just not really part of the story. And Charles's death is sort of basically just depicted as, one minute you see Charles coming into the house saying something about, we must go to school, and the next thing Alex is looking at him, and then that's it. There's no dramatization of that. That's bad, a bad part of the film, but in a way it's totally understandable, because I think there could be legal problems trying to be more explicit on exactly what happened there. But I think part of that makes it quite a dull movie. So a lot of the movie feels a little bit like a soapy that sort of doesn't really go anywhere. Obviously, there are these serious milestones along the way, but because some of these scenes aren't dramatized, because we still don't know what's in the discovery. And by the way, there were 169 pages of discovery sort of leaked and sort of available. East Idaho News are actually still sitting on it. They're deciding not to release it in order to protect the integrity of the case. But because we don't see the inside of this case, it's quite dull from the outside. We know some of the dynamics, but we don't really know the sort of meat and potatoes of really what happened. Some of the forensics, for example. And that brings us to the ugly. Now, one of the reasons I'm actually doing this review is I happened to catch Scott Reich talking about this movie, and he was basically saying that I think one of his team, someone in his team, said to him, "You need to go and do your homework. You need to go and watch this film, and because there's something in it that's a twist." And at that point, I'd only really watched 10 or 15 minutes of it, which shows you although I found it a very good. I thought it did a good job overall. I didn't find it particularly interesting. As a narrative, I found it fairly dull, fairly flat, fairly uninteresting. I thought they covered everything very well, but if you know the case very well, then there was nothing. There were no fireworks really, and so when Scott Reich said, I think yesterday, something about there's a twist, then I thought, well, that's interesting, and then I went and watched the whole thing. And I didn't really find that there was a twist. I think the way Lifetime depicted what happened, on Chad's property, well, that is exactly what I thought happened. That's what I expected, that Alex Cox was responsible for the disposal, right? So I didn't find that a twist at all. What I do think is the ugly part of this is that I think Chad and Lori are going to rely on exactly that as their defense, that basically Alex Cox did everything. And because he's not here to defend himself, it's kind of a slam dunk. Any problem, well, Alex did it kind of thing. The other thing that I think's a problem is that Lori is presented in this dramatization as quite delusional. The Chad actor seems to be fairly aware of what is going on, whereas Lori definitely seems to be portrayed as sort of ditzy and in a dream world, right? And she, if we're dealing with competency, that plays into the whole competency narrative, and that may actually catch on in the public imagination. That what Lori was vulnerable. She was totally manipulated by Chad, and so on and so on and so on. I don't believe that, because Alex did a lot, and Alex was very close to Lori, and so one's got to wonder who gave Alex instructions, right? But another thing that I think was a weak point in the film was, if you're asking the question, who is the mastermind in terms of the story? Who is really to blame for all of this stuff happening? Is it Chad or is it Lori? And I didn't really get a clear sense from the film that the filmmakers had made a decision either way on this. To some extent, some of those looks that Lori made into the camera, where she sort of, almost like the end of Avatar, where she sort of looks directly into the camera quite a few times, that seems to suggest that the filmmakers sort of see her, their focus is a bit more on Lori, and I mean, it's called Doomsday Mom, not Doomsday Dad. So as a way to conclude, I'm just going to provide you with the actual audio from the Bodycam, and you can actually hear exactly what the real Lori Vallow said when the police came up to her, and compare that to how Lifetime dramatized it.
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
So look out for a follow-up to this analysis dealing with the letter that I mentioned earlier. And then I'm also doing more in-depth analysis on Patreon. So if you're very interested in the Lori Vallow case, head on to www.patreon.com/TCRS. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.